right. Well, listen, we're going deep, folks. We usually do. Brandon Angelo at Angelo Fantasy. Matt Waldman here. Let's get it started. We're gonna go
Let's
deep
get into it.
on Justin Fields. Let's start with that. We got a whole lot of
Oh
folks we can
boy.
cover, but let's go deep on him. You wrote a great piece on Twitter about him. I did a little video on him. I know that JT O'Sullivan's done the video. All sorts of
Yep.
people have done the video. So, what are your thoughts on Justin Fields and what's happening in the public eye and on the field?
Yeah, I think, to just kind of shorten everything up, it's basically paralysis by analysis, right? You have a really young quarterback who's trying to do everything right, and who's trying to do it the way that the coaches want him to do it rather than the way he presents that on the field to be his best self, right? He can't do that because he feels like he's pigeonholed into being what he's not right now. And Luke Getzey is essentially trying to make him a version of Aaron Rodgers. Drop back schematics. He's not. That's not who Justin Fields is, right? I mean, he's much closer to Mitchell Trubisky than he is Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah.
And that is an okay thing because he's the 3.0 version of Mitchell Trubisky, which is a pretty damn good player. But right now you're getting an unconfident, and you're getting an unconfident and a player that is trying to play for his coaches and do what they tell him to do rather than do what he thinks he can do best, right? And what I wrote on Twitter was really how like information is processed from a sequencing standpoint and what levels he struggles with, right? The 4 levels of this are pretty simple. First one, observe and identify, right? You're observing what's in front of you right now. You're seeing the picture and identifying what is going on with it, right? Level 2, realize and understand. After you see the picture, you have to understand the steps that turn that picture into a moving production. For the quarterbacks, the other 21 players in the field of play, you have to understand their responsibilities before the ball is snapped, right? Then level 3, survey and anticipate. When you're rolling out, dropping back, your brain will follow a cognitive sequence similar to what are my options? How do I increase the probability of success on this play? What are the possibilities on this play? And those could be a lot. It's a pretty wide bandwidth, but that's what's going through your mind when that's happening in real time. And then level 4 is act and react, right? An action script, an experience, reaction is an unplanned event. So what's happening is when Justin Fields gets to level 3, survey and anticipate, his options are way too broad. You have to thin those out for Justin Fields to be his most successful self, right? I think it was the first drive of the game he played last week against the Buccaneers when they scored a touchdown, design play actions, rollouts, half field reads, get him on the move, and get the ball into DJ Moore's hands, right? I mean, that's the recipe for success. They went away from that. Luke Getzey wants to drop him back. Then they're in trouble. And that's what's happening right now. It's one of those things when you're trying to take a guy who is very clearly not a drop back passer in the NFL and make him a drop back passer in the NFL.
Yeah.
And it's a disaster.
Yeah. First, after reading your analysis, after I had already done some this afternoon and this morning, and then I read yours, and I was like, we're on the same page about a lot of this stuff. And then I happened to tune into Rich Eisen's show, or at least a clip on YouTube that I saw. I don't normally watch a lot of talk radio stuff, but I was kind of angry and irritated from what I saw, which I think is normal for when you listen to this kind of stuff, is that it elicits that. I don't think Rich Eisen, though, is usually seen as a shock talker or controversy guy. But I thought he completely got it wrong when he looked at this Justin Fields presser and Justin Fields said, I'm getting coaching, but I can't think about that when I'm on the field. I just got to play. And what I heard and saw is what you heard and saw when you watched the tape, which is information overload. You can't think on the field. The coaching's all well and good, but you've got to ingrain that, through off-season work. You've got to ingrain it throughout the week. And some things aren't just going to come automatically, even if the coaches are showing it to you after week 1 or before week 2. It's things that you're aware of. You want to be better at it. You want to take that coaching, but you also know if you think about it too much, the rest of your game is going to go to hell, because now the basic things that you already know how to do are falling apart because you're thinking about the things that you don't know how to do or don't do well. And as a result of that, instead, Rich Eisen heard that as equating it to Zach Wilson not taking blame last year, and that Justin Fields didn't like coaching, didn't want coaching, that wasn't receptive to it, was not taking responsibility. And that couldn't be further from the truth. And I'm someone who, when I studied Fields, I thought I think he was my 4th quarterback in that class. And I saw him as tremendously talented, having the highest upside, but I saw him as a guy who needed to be somewhere where they could give him a really defined plan to get him rolling and stair-step him up into being the quarterback that maybe a team would envision a franchise starter to be. Very similar to Josh Allen. Not maybe the exact plan as Josh Allen, but I would say I referred to it as he needs to be on the Josh Allen plan when you think of broad strokes of stair-stepping someone up.
Right.
And where he is, there's so much that has gone wrong in the past 3 years that I almost look at this like it's a bad marriage. Like, your partner, the Chicago Bears, have pretty much abused you and abandoned you during, the first 2.5 years. And it scarred you to the point that when they finally did get help, you could no longer trust them or trust yourself. And you're a shell of what you were, to the point that you're questioning everything, and this isn't a good situation anymore, and you're out. Like, you're like, I can't, I'm done. And when you talk about the sequencing aspect, we both identified that his drops are slow. And and when your feet are slow, you're thinking slow.
It's a crazy thing, and so all this stuff, these are called hindbrain activities, right? And hindbrain activity, it is very simple. It is the analogy of, if a dog is chasing you, if you're thinking about it, you're gonna die. You're already dead, right? You're not thinking, I need to move X miles an hour. You're just running your ass off trying to get away from the dog, right?
Yeah.
That's what it needs to be on the field. It's a hindbrain activity. You already know what to do. Your mind understands the sequencing element and how quickly it needs to fire in order to get to X, Y, Z. But if you're thinking about it, it's going to be slower.
Yeah.
Right.
It's executing to the speed of instinct, like you just. And that dog analogy is perfect, because you're instinctively fight or flight, and you're not thinking, well, if I can stick my foot in this pothole, and do something here that somehow it's going to force the dog to trip over himself. Yeah, I mean, now if you practice that. Some crazy thing 8 million times, and who on earth would, but like, you practice that very specific action a ton of times, like martial artists do. I mean, think of when you look at martial arts moves and you don't know what they are, you're thinking, this looks ridiculous, until it actually has the result you're looking that you see, and you're like, wow, that's very cool. But at first it looks ridiculous to try and do, but they practiced it for years and years and years until they're so comfortable with it that is moved at the speed of instinct. And that's when people are showing you stuff end of week 1, that's not going to happen. And when you become, and you're as good as he is as an athlete, as a thrower of the football, as someone who was a terrific college quarterback, you're used to carrying your team. And when you're an NFL franchise quarterback, or at least drafted to be one, you begin to think that if things don't go well, that means I have to do more, not that I have to do less. You said Mitchell Trubisky 3.0. That's a perfect one too, because Mitchell Trubisky, because Josh Allen was the same way too. When things went bad for them, they tried to do it all themselves. 2 weeks ago, Josh Allen looked like Josh Allen at Wyoming against the Jets, where he just completely just lost his mind.
Just unraveled. Yeah, it was ridiculous.
Yeah, totally unraveled. And it's because they think the best way to get out of this is take it on myself rather than delegate it away and to distribute the ball. And you see Fields dropping too slow, missing reads that are the quickest reads to hit, questioning whether those reads are the ones he should take. They're dropping cover 6, and then he has 2 of his receivers going into cover 6, and he's still looking for them when he's got 2 receivers open underneath the cover 6, and it's like first and 10, and you're like, that kind of stuff is overthinking.
Yeah, it's just everything is so much slower, like from a motor perspective. Like he's moving so much slower than he needs to, and he can't think that fast.
Yeah.
So he gets done with his drop, and then he's like, "Oh shit, what's next?" It's a panic mode instead of a calm. Okay, great, ball needs to go here. This isn't there. Okay, good. Let's move on to the next down. It's brutal to watch. I mean, it's one of those things where it's like without coaches who can instill, "Hey, go be you."
Yeah.
It's not gonna happen, right? I was talking about Shane Steichen and Jalen Hurts, right? Now Shane Steichen and Anthony Richardson. Anthony Richardson looks miles better than Justin Fields.
Yeah.
Why? Yeah. Is he miles better as a quarterback? Probably not.
No.
But
maybe a half a mile. But
I'd say
Yeah.
But what's happening is Anthony Richardson set up to succeed, right?
Yeah.
Shane Steichen's highlighting the qualities that he has and does well. Same with Jalen Hurts when he was in Philadelphia, right? Luke Getsy's trying to make Justin Fields Aaron Rodgers, like I stated, and it's not going to happen. And like you said, it's a bad marriage, and it's not getting any better. So I hope it goes back to, like I said, in the Bill Lazor, half field reads, play action, give the ball to Roschon Johnson 20 times. See what happens.
Yeah, and we've got 2 good contrasts within the conference, because Jordan Love, who I would say was a good half mile worse than Justin Fields as a prospect, at least.
Yeah, for sure.
Because he's had 3 years to sit on the bench, all the prep stuff that you do behind the scenes as a quarterback, he's mastered. He knows what it's like to travel. He knows what it's like to get ready. He's seen top pros do that. He's practiced enough to learn things. So now that he's out of the gate as the starter, one thing that you'll notice with him, his drops are quick. His processing from one read to the next is quick. He knows where that second or third read is, and the ball's coming out, as long as he's not confused by the coverage. Like, you'll see it, and it's just like, it's great, because you see him looking to one side, and all of a sudden he knows that that's not open, and it's a turn and fire. It's not turn, hitch and fire, turn, pat the ball, any delayed type of physical tactic. It's turn and the ball's out to the running back, and he hasn't even seen the running back or coverage well enough yet to other than to know that it's that way, because he's processed it that fast that he can just rip it. And that's one example and of like what Fields can't do right now because he's overthinking.
Yeah.
And then when to your point about what to do with offense, look at Sam Howell, who's basically in his rookie starting part, and I want to talk about him a little bit, because Howell, I mean, look, I think I had Howell as maybe my 6th or 7th. I don't know. He was above Ritter and Malik Willis on my board.
Right.
But he was not super high. But he was like borderline contributor, like a guy who like could probably start for you early, and then if he really shows growth, maybe he'll become your permanent starter, your second contract starter. Yeah. If not, he's a journeyman type. When you watch him in Washington, a lot of things that they're doing is RPOs, half field reads, and some of those half field reads aren't even just rolling out. They do that too, but they do trips to one side and
Yeah,
get three
make it
receivers matched up against two defensive backs, and all you have to do is stare at the open void, and you're manipulating the defense even if you're not looking to the opposite side of the field, because you're waiting for the defender to react to the receiver, and then it goes.
Exactly, and it's making it easy.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, is you're making it simple. Okay, you go out corner curl or out corner stop. Okay, great. You want to hit your high-low read? Great, that's not there. Hit your stop.
Yeah.
Like, it's not like, that's the thing, is like, it doesn't have to be difficult.
No.
And there's playmakers on the offense and the Washington offense that can create after the catch, right? All three of those guys can.
Yeah.
And so that's the beauty of it. You doesn't all have to be on Sam Howell.
Yeah.
Great. If Dotson's running the corner, it's not open. Okay, great. Let's just throw the hitch to Curtis Samuel and get a few yards. And I was watching the Lions this past weekend, and we were alluding to just understanding where your guys are in your own sequence on a given play. It was like a third down, and Jahmyr Gibbs was just in the flat, and Goff knew based on the coverage, he just checked down right away.
Yeah.
Great, got a first down.
Yeah.
Like, and that's the thing, is it doesn't have to be hard.
No.
Right? And it's just making it easy.
And every time if you ever watch, when you watch TV and you turn on the pregame and it's a rookie quarterback, and the quarterback's gotten some advice from some retired Hall of Famer, like, Richardson with Peyton Manning, or Tom Brady talking to one of, to a young quarterback, you always hear the same thing. Take the easy play. Take the check downs. It's pro quarterbacking is about the check downs. It's about taking, and what we always highlight is, see, he didn't take that check down. He got aggressive and went downfield. And that's great when you have a clear opportunity to do that. But if you've exhausted your opportunity and you've skipped the check down, or the down and distance situation is 1st and 10, and the coverage is playing way off, and you've got the out, the quick out for a first down, take it. And you're good, because it's 2nd and 5 now. It opens the entire playbook.
Exactly.
Yes.
And that's the thing, is it doesn't have to be the home run.
Yeah.
Right? Just live the fight another down. And that's the crazy thing about NFL quarterbacking. It's like a lot of the guys who are pretty high level processors are not high level athletes.
Yep.
Like Jared Goff and Kirk Cousins and NFC North are good examples, right?
Yeah.
Make the right play.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And the only reason, it was funny because Jared Goff threw his first pick, and God knows how many passes. Got Hizzy threw. Threw behind I think it was an angle route that Gibbs was running, an option route.
Yeah.
Threw behind the option, and then it was whatever, right? Yeah. But the decision was great.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, is just make the easy choice.
And the athletes tend to think they have to do more. That was always Mitchell Trubisky's problem, was I always joke that
they're so gifted.
Yeah. I always talked about these guys interviewing for jobs, and that year I joked that, Mahomes and Chad Kelly were the two guys that you wanted to absolutely
Chad Kelly, man.
But Mitchell Trubisky was the guy that looked great on paper, but you had a sneaking feeling that he was always going to try and take too much on himself to do the job, that he wouldn't know how to delegate when things got stressful. And that's what Fields is doing right now. That's what Josh Allen does when things go haywire. That's why Trubisky ended up out of where he was, because when he was backed up in his own area, or in the red zone at North Carolina, he did it, and he continued to do it at Chicago. He'd make the boneheaded play trying to do too much, and it just comes down to those things. So, like, when you look at a Sam Howell and you see those nice, young receivers, he's got two tight ends, an old one and a young one, who have great length and can vacuum some errant throws over the middle. And he's got a little bit of improv ability. They're doing well by him. I mean, he's standing in the pocket, throwing around defensive tackles, taking hits, and making accurate throws in the intermediate and vertical ranges of the field. And you're like, that's where you want to. They play four verticals a lot. You know,
Yeah.
they just basically send 3 or 4 verticals, and then they've got the back or the tight end as the leak option.
As a safety blanket, and that's exactly, and that's it's winning football.
That's what
right?
Aaron Rodgers used to do early on. They used to play lots of 4 verticals with him. You know?
Yeah, it's smart, man. I mean,
Yeah.
I think that's I think really another interesting offense too that we'll talk about is the Rams.
Let's do it.
With Kyren and Puka. Like I think one of my biggest surprises of the early season has been the Rams offense.
Yeah.
And them being a top 5 unit in the league without their best player.
Yeah.
And that's been crazy. And I think the emergence too of Tutu Atwell has been really awesome to see because McVay kind of has him in a Tyreek Hill role, right?
Yeah.
A lot of speed motion, but a lot of getting the defense on their heels. And I'll be honest, Tutu Atwell has looked fantastic.
He has.
And it's been fun to watch.
It has, because I've been making so many jokes about him for the past 3 years that if a stiff wind blows, that he could get an extra 50 yards, but if it's a headwind, he might lose 50 yards, or he get blown through the uprights or all sorts of things.
Yeah,
but he's been tough. He's been tough at the catch point.
Yes.
And he's made the plays when asked to do so. Now, he had some diagnostic issues being on the same page with Goff that were biggies at the end of the game last week against San Francisco, but so did Van Jefferson, so did and then Kyren Williams had a little mistake here and there, but they're mistakes you would expect from young players on the field in a big game where communication or maybe some minor execution things that blew up. But overall, I mean, you look at Kyren Williams, for example. I mean, I would even argue that they were missing their 2 most talented players on offense, because Cam Akers and that whole saga,
100%.
I don't even. That's another one I want to talk about in a little bit too, because I don't even know where to begin with that. But I mean, what do you think of, in addition to Atwell, what do you think of Kyren and Puka Nacua and how they're doing, and how does that? What do you think that relays for like fantasy? How do you view them in a fantasy scope?
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. I think Kyren, when he was coming out of Notre Dame, the one thing I noted in my analysis was this is probably the best pass protector in this class, right? He's not overly big, right? He's 5'9", probably just south of 200 pounds, but he doesn't make mistakes. Yeah. And that's the thing I think we overlook a lot is we love the talented players. We love the Ronald Joneses, but what happens when they make mistakes?
Yeah.
Right? Same with DeAndre Swift. That's why he's not in Detroit anymore. Right? If you make mistakes, you lose your job. Yeah. It happens in any job. And that's what is happening with Kyren. What he does well is he doesn't make mistakes. He's fundamentally a sound football player. He's not fast. He's not big. Very average athlete, but plays assignment sound football, doesn't fumble, reliable pass catcher, and will keep your quarterback clean on third.
He's Justin Forsett.
Yes, 100%. And Justin Forsett had some damn good years in Seattle. So I think
one in Baltimore.
Yeah, exactly. And I think for him, for Kyren, I think he's a rest season RB2. Why not?
Yeah.
McVay has told you, and he said it like he didn't say it, but when you watch the tape, week 1, I wrote something to all the subscribers in Angelo Analysis, and I said, biggest surprise is Kyren Williams, and I think he's taking Cam Akers' job. Because he was on the field in high leverage situations when Cam Akers wasn't. Yeah. Goal line, third downs, 2-minute, 4-minute. All those situations were all Kyren Williams. And I'm sitting here watching that. I have Cam Akers on my fantasy team. I'm like, where's Cam Akers? Yeah. And very apparent, Cam Akers lost his job.
Yeah.
Because it's not that Cam Akers is less talented than Kyren Williams is. Kyren Williams isn't going to make the mistakes.
Yeah.
And that's the big deal right now. And I think, too, from that point, going on to Puka Nacua, that's what impressed me about Puka in watching him the first 2 weeks of his life as a pro is you don't see the rookie mistakes, right? And that's the thing is he understands zones,
yes,
which is super, super important, right? he understands defender depth, and he understands this is super important. From high level receivers really get this really well, and it's the ability to have that sixth sense of when the defender is closing, and what to do about it.
When to cut the route short, the route break short.
Exactly.
When to settle into the zone. When to keep moving. When to get more depth. When to break back to the ball. Yeah. Any mistakes that he makes are plays that veterans make mistakes on. And you would not even call it a mistake. It might be a difficult target that it's hard to catch.
Yeah.
Because you're playing tight mans on you and the guy just outplayed you for the ball.
Exactly. And again, this is not an overly talented kid. Right, this is not a physically like this. He is not DK Metcalf, right? Like this is not this physical juggernaut, right? When you watched him at BYU, I actually liken him to Robert Woods because you saw a lot of run game help both as a blocker and on jet, but also too his ability as a blocker, right? I mean, I think he's huge in the run game. He understands leverage. Not a big guy. He's tough, man. He makes the right play, and he has great instincts. So, I mean, he's a perfect fit in that offense, and I am really excited to see Kupp, Atwell, and Naku on the field at the same time.
Yeah.
Because that is an ascending trio right there.
Yeah. They suddenly went from looking like they had nothing in the spring to being a competent, if not very good, young receiving core. And Puka, to me, I mean, like, I had him as a middle-class version of Golden Tate. Like, not as athletic as Tate, but could do, you liked him for what he could do inside. But I love the Woods comparison because obviously that's where he is, and you can see why they valued those skill sets. But at the same time, Tate was a Stafford guy, guy who could play inside and outside for you. You could do a little bit of both. He could win contested plays as you needed. He's just not as explosive as Tate. But certainly can run. And then with Kyron, I thought you hit the nail on the head. Like, the first thing I didn't think about the leverage situations, and I should have. Those were really, that's a very important thing. For me, what I kept seeing was, at first I was seeing it from the standpoint of Kyron's getting lighter boxes, Woods is getting the heavier boxes, and I was thinking it simplistically on that level. But really, sure, there's a point where when your change of pace back, or at least the guy that your opponents think is the change of pace back, is on the field in certain down distances and you run to it, they're playing pass. Whereas with Cam Akers, they were playing pretty heavy. But when you look at last week's game, what you saw also is that, like you said, didn't make many mistakes, and that was the most important thing. But that line play is doing well.
Yeah, they're good.
They're
way better than people thought.
Yeah, and that makes sense because when you look at the end of the year last year with Akers, he was tearing it up last year at the end of the year. So that line that wasn't supposedly very good is actually very good at what they do. So when you think of it from that perspective, I agree. Kyron Williams is probably running back 2. He may be valued as a running back 1 after 2 weeks, but if you keep him in running back 2 range in terms of how you're valuing him as a tool for your lineup and how you would view him as a commodity if anyone wants to negotiate with you, you're going to have a realistic understanding of what you can either get for him or what you can give up for him.
Right.
And I would say the same is true of Puka, because I think, as the zone part is so important, what we have to see is when they do put him outside with Cooper Kupp there, is he going to win those one-on-ones? And I think he will win enough of them that he's going to still be like a wide receiver 3 in a lineup. Maybe a high-end wide receiver 3, low-end wide receiver 2.
100% agree, and I think that's where you look at to the scoring offense, right? I mean, this is probably going to be a top 12 scoring unit the rest of the season, right?
Yeah.
And that's a big deal, right? He's going to have a lot of red zone opportunities, a lot of low red zone opportunities too, and that's super important because with Kyron Williams, there's not going to be a low red zone rushing team. It's going to be a lot of play pass, and it's going to be a lot of backside drags and things like that, and digs, and I think it's going to be Puka running those things, right? And I think that's going to be a big thing too. Rest of the season is I think we're going to see the red zone targets bump up. He doesn't have a touchdown yet. Think
Yeah.
of that.
Yeah.
He hasn't even had a touchdown yet.
Yeah.
So it's crazy what he's been doing. And, I think he has the most targets ever through first 2 games. He has 35 targets.
Yeah.
The next closest person, I think, is Justin Jefferson with like 25 or something like that.
Yeah.
So ridiculous. And 25 targets through 2 games is a lot. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
35 is an absurd number.
Yeah.
So it's pretty cool to watch them, watch them work, man. I'm super excited about all 3 of those dudes, Puka, Tutu, and Kyron, man. I mean, they're fun to watch, and they're good young players. And I think guys like that are going to keep McVay coaching, I think.
I think you're right, and I think they're still going to continue to see zone because do you really want? It's hard to match up against Atwell with his speed. It's hard to match up with Kupp because of his route running. You've got Tyler Higbee, who's a bit of a mismatch when he's matched up against linebackers or certain safeties. So yeah, they're probably going to have to continue to play zone, which benefits Nakua greatly in terms of what he'll do on the outside entering into this. So
right.
I like that. Look, let's kind of. I'm going to bring this mood down a little bit because I think everyone's a huge Nick Chubb fan. I don't think you can't. If you like football, you like Nick Chubb. I mean, that's just how that is. And while I think most RSP subscribers know that, I was a huge fan of Nick Chubb, as a rookie, and I had him over Saquon Barkley, and I was a big proponent of his game. It's certainly hard to see what happened on Monday night, but it's unfortunately it's part of the game. This isn't new. If you go back to when I was growing up, there was a quiet back who was one of the first to get 2,000 yards from scrimmage for the Atlanta Falcons by the name of William Andrews, who was the one player that the things that I always talk about with him is that I watched him run over Ronnie Lott and leave Ronnie Lott splayed out in the flat on like basically a swing pass when he scored for like 70 yards out after just running him over. And Lott had a good hit on him. He just bounced off him. And Walter Payton in Sport Magazine, which was a magazine that was on newsstands for a while back in the late 70s, early 80s, they asked him who would he, other than Matsui, who would he block for if that running back was on his team? And he said the only running back in the league that I would block for is William Andrews. And so you got guys like William Andrews, Edgerrin James, who still had a much longer career, but wasn't the same player. I mean, he's still a Hall of Fame player.
Sure, absolutely.
But he might have been on his way to greatest of all time argument if after his first year and a half, 2 years, that quickness and that athletic ability that he had, along with everything else. Then you look at guys like Kajana Carter, Robert Edwards. These were all players with unbelievable, promising starts to their career, and they ended suddenly. Obviously, the king of them all, Bo Jackson. When it comes to that. So, in a way, we're fortunate to have seen Nick Chubb play as long as he did, considering the injury he had at Georgia. That my buddy Gene Bramall, who's used to do injury stuff at Football Guys, when we were coming back from the Senior Bowl, and I was describing the injury, he said that's a very difficult injury to have 3 ligament tears, to sew it up as a doctor and get it just right, because it's usually too tight or too loose, and then the player's never quite comfortable with their movements again, because there's always something a little tweaked and off, and they just never quite trust it, and they can't quite trust it because of that feeling, and it just nags at them. And so the fact that they got it just right with him in the first place to have the career he had was amazing. But now they've signed Kareem Hunt, and we don't know what happened with Chubb other than dislocated kneecap. That probably means he tore all 3 of those ligaments again, maybe 4. I would have to, I hate saying it, but I would have to think this is it for him. I mean, like, if it's not, it's going to have to be they opened it up and go, it's not nearly as bad of a situation as we thought it was.
Yeah, I mean, the tough thing is with multi-ligament injured, especially second time, same knee. I know I read the meniscus damage, obviously, multi-ligament, multi-ligament damage. I think the issue is going to be his age too, right? He has a lot of miles on him, and this is in my opinion the best running back in the NFL.
Yeah.
In Nick Chubb, like
No
hands
question.
down, right?
Yeah.
And that's what really guts me is this is a guy who doesn't talk,
Yep.
doesn't have an ego, just wants to go out there and play ball, right? And does everything right, and then Minka Fitzpatrick goes low, and there it goes, right? I mean, it's just it's a football injury. And you can't. It's not grass or turf or none of that shit, man. Hey, it's just a football injury, man, and that sucks, but it happens. And I think I don't know if we've seen the last of Nick Chubb, but I think we've seen the last of peak Nick Chubb.
Yeah.
Right. I think that's very safe to say. If he comes back, I think he will. I don't know if he'll be the same player, right? But it's like Kobe after his Achilles, right? Doesn't have to be the same player to be successful.
Yep.
You can reinvent yourself in different ways and still have success in the league, and I think he will. I think the question is going to be with that Browns offense is, what do you do next? I think the frightening thing is we can't rely on Nick Chubb. And I think they realized last year when they had Deshaun Watson, and you kind of thought Deshaun was rusty. And Nick Chubb, great season, obviously, and was the engine of that offense. This year, you're thinking, okay, Nick Chubb's going to get us off to a good start. Deshaun Watson is going to be ready. Deshaun Watson doesn't look ready.
No.
Doesn't look good at all, right? Timing's off. He looks frustrated. He's shoving officials. And Nick Chubb's gone.
Yeah.
So what do? You have to rely on Deshaun because you paid him to. That's what you paid him to do.
Yeah.
Right? And that's the issue is, what are you going to do with that offense? I think Jerome Ford is a good piece to NFL. I think he's a good complementary back in the NFL. I think he has great top-end speed. He's a good accelerator. He's a linear-driven runner who can give you 4.5 pop with a good offensive line, right?
He
Not
runs
a bad
hard,
thing.
can catch.
Yes, 100%. He's learned under Chubb. I like it. Kareem Hunt is just, he's okay. I think he's going to be in more so for 2-minute and third down situations if Ford needs that, right? Because I think that's the area where Ford doesn't have the experience yet.
Veteran redundancy.
Bingo. High level situations, super important, right? I mean, we've seen guys like Giovanni Bernard made a living doing it.
Yep.
And I mean, that's what he did for his whole career.
Yeah.
And that's going to be the Kareem Hunt role, similar to Giovanni Bernard. But I think the big thing here is going to be Amari Cooper. I think if there's going to be a saver to this Browns offense, it's going to be Amari Cooper. I think he's the only elite player left on the offense.
Yep.
And Deshaun Watson's just not it. And the one thing that made me so upset, and I don't know why it made me so upset, I saw a video of Deshaun Watson out on the town for his, 28 years old, 29th birthday, I don't know what it was. And, it's all this glitz and glamour. Dude just lost again. And, what are you doing? That's my issue is you're coming back from whatever happened. Not going to comment on that, but you're coming back. Don't you want to prove to everyone that you're going to be the best version of yourself? And so far he hasn't. And what do you do if you're the Browns? If they lose their next 3 games, do you turn to Dorian Thompson-Robinson and say, "Hey kid, let's see what you got"?
Yeah.
I mean, what do you do? It's tough, man.
It's a very tough thing because, and as a Browns fan, it's sickening because it's like Nick Chubb was the reason I stayed a Browns fan.
Yeah,
I mean, it was they drafted Baker Mayfield, and I was like, easy, I'm done. I can be a Ravens fan now. I know that's heresy, but whatever, I'm okay. That team's still the soul of what I grew up with, so I can do it. That's okay. And then they drafted Nick Chubb, and I was like, no, I'm still here. I'm still gonna be here because they fucking drafted this guy. But when you look at Deshaun Watson, I think that Troy Aikman said it very well. Was that the offense really doesn't fit what Deshaun does best in
Correct.
terms of
I
what
agree.
Stefanski asks. Because it's a lot more drop back. It's a lot more. Think of what Cousins did with Stefanski. A little
Yeah.
bit more of a drop back distributor, stay on structure, that kind of thing. Um, Watson is very good off structure. Um, you have great offensive linemen who expect you to stay on structure because they're doing good work. They're doing quality work. Don't screw this up by going outside the pocket. That's why we were mad at Baker, probably. I mean, I'm putting words in their mouth about that, but that's some of the things that Baker sometimes did wrong too. Is she tried to go off structure too much, and basically abandon the leverage of his blockers and ruin what they were doing for him. And I think Watson has a tendency to do the same thing. So I think the big question is Kevin Stefanski going to adjust the offense to for Watson because they've got to lean on him, or are they going to keep the same offense for the sake of the rest of the talents on the team and just make Watson get better at what he does? Now, that's the real answer is I think the look on your face, which is they're probably not doing that with how much money they paid Watson.
Yeah, it's just it's tough because I think now it's like I think if you're upper management of the Cleveland Browns, you're like training wheels are off.
Yeah.
Like this is what we paid you to do.
Yeah.
Right. This is why we paid you so much money, and now go win some football games. I mean that's as simple as that. And I think, like I said, Amari Cooper is going to be. I mean, you're feeding him 12 targets a game.
Yeah.
Like that's what you have to do. He's your best offensive player.
Yep.
He's gotta be the one you lean on here. And then I don't think they have a bad receiver room either with Elijah Moore. I think Elijah Moore can help you out in the backfield too in the run.
Yeah.
I think that's gonna be an area where they integrate him in a little more into the run game. Similar to how I think Laviska Shenault was in his rookie season with the Jaguars, right? We saw him get a lot of actual RB touches, which is actually good for him. They've won the Panthers don't do that right now, which is fine. But I think Elijah Moore's role needs to be kind of a rookie season Laviska Shenault plus.
Yeah.
Right? Get him some RB touches.
Too much has been made of him in fantasy, I think, a little bit.
Because he's not. I loved him coming out on this. Don't get me wrong.
Me too. But
it's just you got to find a role, right? You got to find a niche in the league, and he has it. So
I'll end this part about Deshaun Watson on this. He grew up probably about 20 miles from where I live right now, and I've been in that town enough that I'm speculating, but somebody I know, let's just say I played the telephone game with this, so it may not be completely reliable, but just say people I know who've talked to him in the past. I get a sneaking feeling that what happened with him, certainly, I think it's good to probably make the assumption that he did a lot of things that were very wrong, okay, very inappropriate at the very least. I would also say that people are complicated, and that just because, and I'm not saying, I'll say the final word is he did wrong and he should have known better. That's how I'll put it. But I'll also say that there's some naivete with this guy, and I think that there's a bit of naivete from being a star athlete and having a certain expectation, probably. Played out over and over again since you were at Clemson, maybe even at the end of high school, and then probably continued to the point that he behaved inappropriately and got away with it because there were either people who were like, I'm okay with it, some people who were like, I'm not okay with it but I'm afraid to say anything, and some who were like, I'm not okay with it and I'm reporting this. And then the ones who were not okay with it but not saying anything said, you know what, someone stood up, it's time for me to do that too. And I think that for him to, and if people, when he says I don't think I did anything wrong or said some of the things that he said, I could see it coming from a place of naivete, because I could see the idea of him probably asking around what how do I procure this kind of experience? How do I procure these types of experiences? And probably had some people tell him, but in a very simplistic manner, that he ended up going completely in the wrong direction with it. Because like I'm trying to remember the dude from Ralph. No, not Ralph. Marcellus Wiley. Columbia educated, great defensive, good defensive end who, did commentary. I heard him talking about and saying, look, everyone knew the massage therapists in the locker room, that you come back to the locker room and you would, some of the guys would say to the other guy, they're friendly. They're a little more friendly than just professional. And some would say they're strictly professional, and or he said he dated his massage therapist that he met as an NFL employee. And so things like that can happen. And I think that sometimes what happens is that you look at the exceptional circumstances and think it's the rule, and then you're naive about how that goes. And so I say all that not to defend Deshaun Watson in any way, shape, or form, just to explain the dynamic of how a young athlete may see things. In the same way that I know someone who interacted with a prominent Georgia player who went on to the pros, who's long since retired, who used to bring a one of those crowd control like velvet rope things to the club, and literally hit on this. And one of the teammates hit on this woman like much older than them, and she politely turned them down. And then he basically said, well, I've got a bunch of women waiting in line to perform fellatio on us. Oh, as if like that, you should be flattered that I even asked you, and, then she, let him have it. And by the way, she's a judge in New Orleans right now.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So it makes me laugh, but this expectation that's had sometimes from people who that this happens, and they almost get enabled to that extent. I think that's where this went awfully wrong for him, and I think that when you look at how he's behaving now, I think he's lost. I think he's just a completely lost human being.
I think really, it's a complete lack of. I think it's a complete lack of ownership.
Yeah.
In general, and I think he's lost the respect of so many people, rightfully so. And he's my least favorite player in the NFL by a wide margin.
Yeah.
But I think for that Browns organization, from a football standpoint, that Browns organization is saying, we took you on. We knew we took the social risk, and now what are you giving us, right?
Yeah.
And so I think we are closer than I think we realized to the Browns moving on from Deshaun Watson.
Yeah.
And I think it's because you take on that much risk and you get no reward, and that it's not great.
They screwed themselves the minute they signed this kid.
Yeah, 100%.
And it's so sad because as a fan, you look at it and go, I don't want to root for this kid. I haven't wanted to root for him the moment that all this broke out. But there's so many other players I really enjoy watching on this team, like Grant Delpit or Denzel Ward or Myles Garrett, and then and then you look at this and go, yeah, what I can understand how Cleveland fans are just like, I don't even want to talk about it. They're probably just, because me, it's like this is the first time in probably since they signed Deshaun Watson that I've literally said, this is how I feel about it, which is like, I've tried to avoid talking about it for an entire year because it's just disgusting to me.
Yeah,
we're at where we are.
It's
yeah. So let's move on to someone who isn't disgusting, and that's Geno Smith, who some people were disgusted by his first week because he missed 2 offensive tackles to injury, but then came back in Detroit and played very well.
Yeah, no, he's becoming a pretty damn good NFL quarterback, man.
Yeah.
And I think when you saw him in West Virginia, I think we thought that was going to happen 7 years ago, right?
Yeah.
But it's nice that it's happening now, and he's playing some pretty dang good ball, and he has really good playmakers around. Especially with the healthy DK Metcalf and JSN and in Lockett and Noah Fant too is a decent piece. And then the running backs and Charbonnet and Walker. I mean, you have a really good nucleus to kind of go off of. And he played some really good ball against Detroit. Detroit's no slouch, right? That's not a pushover team anymore.
Yeah.
And Dan Campbell's got those boys playing. They put tough. They're one team I will say Detroit will play any team in the league tough.
Yeah.
Just because of who they are. And he didn't back down. He played a hell of a game. And I think he's someone that is going to be a starter for the rest of his career and is going to continue to even get better, I think, as he gets older. But I've been really surprised, pleasantly surprised by how much better he has gotten so quickly. Because when you thought, hey, he beat out Drew Lock, you thought, oh boy, here you go. This is going to be a 6-win Seahawks team.
Yeah, Drew Lock will be in by week 9.
Exactly, right? Yeah, but I'm surprised, man. He's been great.
And especially last week when they had replacement tackles, and he's running for his life. Even the play where he ends up taking a sack deep in his own territory late in the fourth quarter, where he's basically pulling a Kyler Murray, Donovan McNabb running all over the field, Russell Wilson type of thing. You looked at that and go, wow, the athletic ability to do what he did and the awareness to do what he did physically was so impressive. It's just you wish that he had thrown the ball away. He got too invested. But much of the time he's not doing that. Much of the time he's creating time and he's finding the open man.
Yep.
And he's tough, he's accurate, he's got the arm. I'm a big fan of what I'm seeing, and you're right. And I'm a bigger fan because the fact that he didn't go completely into a hole and just become a journeyman who ends up leaving the league. Now, there's no shame in that because it's a tough league. We often shame it, but it's a tough league. But for him to be able to be at this point, where he had such a strong season last year, and it looks like he can continue that, is just it's a very inspirational story for a lot of guys who lose their confidence and it's over. So what about Brock Purdy? Where are you with Brock Purdy at this point after seeing him late last year and this year?
I think with a roster that good, he's the perfect fit.
Yeah.
Because what's going to happen is he's going to distribute the ball, he's going to get it to his playmakers, and he doesn't have to do that much with how good those guys are after the catch. Is there a better after-catch trio than McCaffrey, Kittle, and Debo? Like, really? No, probably not.
No.
So, I mean, you're looking at probably the best roster in the league. All you have to do is get him the ball and be on time. And that Shanahan system is a tough system, right?
Yep.
But I think he's done such a good job at understanding the selflessness it takes to be a quarterback in that system. That they're succeeding and they're going to succeed because of it. I mean, I think to me, they're the team to beat in the NFC.
Yeah.
I think them and Philly for sure, but I think a better team than Philadelphia is right now.
Yeah.
And I think that's going to be really interesting to see as we get closer to playoff time, what moves Philadelphia makes. I think we're hearing rumors of Budda Baker. And I think that makes a lot of sense for the back end of their defense. And also, to their run fits, I think he's better than people think in the run game.
Oh, yeah.
He's great. But I think that's a move that I think if you're Philly, you definitely make. Because, when you play the Niners, man, you better be really assignment sound. McCaffrey's. You're gonna look up, and McCaffrey's gonna have 120 in the first half, and then it's over by that time. So they're an interesting team. I really like Brock Purdy, and in fantasy too. I think if you're a super flex league, you have a QB too.
Yeah,
he's steady Eddie. He's not gonna be super flashy, but he's gonna be someone that's gonna that's going to get you, especially in 6 point per pass touchdown. He's going to get you your step.
Yeah, I think
And he's good.
You might even be able to get away with him as a low end quarterback one if you have a super team, or
Yeah.
So if you're like one step away from having a super team and you've got Justin Fields and it's not working quite out just yet, but you have like but you can maybe make a trade to like, I don't know, like if you had like Fields and another top quarterback and you wanted to trade the top quarterback knowing that you could get Purdy off the waiver wire and get something in return to fill your receiver or running back core or tight end core and get a super tight end, one of the top guys, get a Kelsey or a Kittle or a Hawkinson type of player, and then you're able to like maybe add Purdy to your roster. You might be able to like survive with that if you're like shooting for like swinging for the fences. Likely you're not going to do that. I mean, likely you're just going to go with what you have. But I think that if you're one of those people that wants to itch to try and do that, Purdy certainly could be that guy that the difference between him and the 11th ranked or the 12th ranked quarterback is literally less than half of a point per game. So why not? If you're thinking you can get an extra 2 or 3 points per game into your lineup, and right now you adding Purdy and that's doing better than what you got from Fields,
right?
Why not? Or the net gain seems to be better,
right.
with the moves. But yeah, with Purdy, I mean, I think that you're right. I mean, he doesn't make many mistakes. He can be aggressive within the scheme, and with when you have Christian McCaffrey and you motion him around like he's Julian Edelman or Wes Welker, you basically get that effect that Tom Brady had, which is like, oh, this is what the defense has declared. Now I know what the coverage is pretty quickly. Here's where I can attack the field. And he seems to process that information very well. And what's interesting is when he does face Philadelphia, if it's Philadelphia in the conference championship, is he going to be able to make some of those 3 to 5 plays that you
right.
need? If he can, they're in business. And I think people are going to be surprised because I think he's going to be able to do some of those. Now,
yeah, I agree.
The Philly side of the ball was fun last week to watch. DeAndre Swift run for 170 something yards.
Yeah.
But I think it also highlights things we kind of alluded to, which is, look, great offensive line in Detroit, great offensive line in Philly, but Jared Goff does not force defenders to account for him in the run game. Whereas with Jalen Hurts, they absolutely do. It may force 2 defenders to account for him, which can often give you a box advantage of 3-on-5, 6-on-4, 7-on-5, things like that. If you're counting like one side of the play,
right.
You're getting a 1 or 2 man advantage. And when you're even with the defense, when you count the running back and you're even with the defense, that's a runnable play. If you have 1 man, that's a play you're expecting to possibly move the chains with.
Right.
You have 2, yeah. I mean, and Swift's still doing the Swift things that aren't great with his game, like peeking outside too often, trying to bounce stuff. When he has to make a cut, he veers way away from his blockers, and he's like zigzagging towards a defender and zigging back in. But doesn't matter as much. It's like we've got big craters. They're even bigger. They're going to stay craters because everyone's worried about Hurts keeping that ball. You got to respect that, and he's getting chunk plays.
Yeah, and he's going to get so many second level opportunities with Philadelphia, and it's going to be in the middle of the field, and that's going to be the huge thing is when they're going to run a lot of zone reads too with him, which he fits pretty well in that because you have to get him downhill. Right, when he gets into huge trouble is when he has the option to veer. Right, we just call it ineffective veering. If he has the option to veer outside and veer path, he'll do it because that's his natural inclination, his tendency to do. And the difference between him and Miles Sanders is that cognitively they're kind of similar, that they don't process information super well. But Miles Sanders did not have any lateral element to his game. Right? Wasn't a good enough mover to get around backers. He either had to go through the backer or try to, sprint past them, right? Out accelerate them. And Swift has the lateral elements of the game where he can manipulate backers a little better. And we saw that in last week's game, right, against the Vikings. And I think that's going to be a huge element to them going forward. I think Kenneth Gainwell offers you a little more safety.
Yeah.
Right? And a little much better in pass pro, and that's an area where DeAndre Swift was not good in Detroit. Yeah. And that too is an area where I think in third down, 2 minute and 4 minute, the high leverage situations, and even goal line, Kenneth Gainwell might still see those looks. Yeah. But I think between the 20s, DeAndre Swift is a better bet for big plays, for splash plays. And if you want to motion him out, use him as a decoy, an empty is I think is important. You have to account for him on the boundary as a receiver, right? With Kenneth Gainwell, you don't have to as much as you do DeAndre Swift, I think, after the catch in particular. Yeah. Because you can run some delayed drags with DeAndre Swift. I don't think he's that great of a route runner on the boundary, but you can run some delayed drag with him and do some design screens and things of that nature, which you can't do as much with Kenneth Gainwell, right? Or at least the threat of him isn't as big. But I think we're seeing a potential resurgence in his career, and I wrote something to the effect of, this is good because if this wasn't the fit he might be out of the league by next year. Yeah, because that's the way it was. Very Ronald Jones-esque almost, right? Ronald Jones is now Cowboy. I don't know. I don't even in the practice squad anymore.
Yeah. But he's not seeing time. That's for
sure. No, he's not, and it's not because he's not talented, right? Yeah. It's because he makes too many mistakes, and I think DeAndre Swift is finally realizing, oh my gosh, this is what this league is, and he's playing really well, and I think he's going to be a great rest of the season addition.
Yeah. Any hope for Rashad Penny?
Whew. He looks like he's lost his step. And that's like when you watch him, especially, I mean, he super dynamic with the ball in his hand. And we're talking about that level of acceleration for a guy who's 220 plus pounds. I mean, he was one of probably the best linear runners in the NFL of the last 5 years. Like, I could very short list. But with his recent injury, you can kind of see that initial acceleration, that early excel, it has lost a step or two. Yeah. And that's where he really had an advantage on backers is you'd see him so many times be by the backer's turning his hips and see you later. And now he just doesn't have that. And I think he's going to be someone, I think, that gets cut. I think it's more likely they bring in a veteran for the playoff run. If they want a third veteran back, it's kind of a banger, like a format type. Yeah. Than keeping a guy like Rashad.
Yeah, I can see that. So, you know what we've been waiting for all along with all this talk. We've just wanted more Tajae Spears. So, what have your thoughts have been after a couple weeks of seeing Tajae Spears in action? I think you're still standing pat on that we might see him as the starter at year's end.
I think so.
What has caught your eye about him?
I think the first thing was not even him. It's him out snapping Derrick Henry week 1 was not on my bingo card.
Yeah.
Like, absolutely not. I did not think that would happen. And I think I didn't realize he'd play so much so quickly. I thought this was going to be a splash play or two. Tim Kelly's like, this guy's pretty good. Let's put him in some. But no, he's playing in high leverage situations. Yeah. Big deal. And he looks good working off of Henry, yes, which is super, super important, right? I mean, and you can have either of those guys in the field and the defense is going to have to account for them. Yeah. That's what didn't happen in the past, right? They've had some okay secondary pieces, right? Like Darrington Evans and some other guys who are all right, but like not like starter caliber backs, like Spears is. And I think that's a super big deal for the identity of the Titans offense, is where those guys can be interchangeable and you potentially have a future at the position. Where Derrick Henry still looks like Derrick Henry to me. I think he looks good.
Yeah.
He looks the same old Derrick Henry. But I think, especially by season's end, I think you see the roles go in opposite directions. Especially as if you're the Titans and you're in playoff contention, and you kind of want to maybe save some of the tread and the tires for the playoffs with Derrick Henry, right?
Yeah.
And you start giving Spears more looks out in the backfield, and start giving him some more angle and option concepts, which I'm surprised they don't run with him very much with Tannehill, right? Tannehill's a timing-based passer. That works really well with what unit they have out there at receiver, which is Hopkins, Burks, and what else do you have? Westbrook Akine, right?
Whoa, yeah.
Yeah, and it's like you don't have another go-to target, and I think Spears can be that guy.
Yeah.
And I think, honestly, he needs to if they're going to make a playoff. I think he's going to be the X factor for them being a playoff team in the AFC.
What blew my mind was not just what you mentioned with the outsnapping Derrick Henry, but being the main pass pro bodyguard of Ryan Tannehill in the Superdome in the season's opener and stoning, twisting defensive tackles at his size. I thought he repeatedly moved guys out of the way, picked up the twists, was, practically flawless as a pass protector in that noisy environment. And then, the routes that he ran, they weren't ideal, but they were huge play opportunities that it wasn't his problem that that he didn't come down with those. And that to me was like, oh, Mike Vrabel saw this. They saw what he must have been doing in practice. I get it now. Like I kept thinking, big play receiver, they'll use him on screens, they'll use him on, like you said, option routes, using him on timing-based routes, angle routes. He'll run the ball. He'll be that change of pace guy. And then Derrick Henry's either going to be in there. They'll get an extra tight end. They got Wesco. He can be that extra offensive lineman type of thing. Maybe they're going to do that as a bodyguard, because surely they're not going to have Tajae Spears in there pass protecting right away. Maybe down the line. And then to watch him do it, I was just like, okay.
Yeah.
That's why. Vrabel saw him and said, that's it. We're putting this kid in from the jump, and we're going to let him get comfortable. And when a player is that good in their all-around game that early, that a coach like Vrabel is like, yep, come on in.
He's a hard man to impress.
Yes. And he didn't, and I don't think he's said much about, I haven't looked for what he said about Tajae Spears, because I would think that if he said glowing things, we would have heard all about it.
Oh, for sure. He doesn't say, he's notorious for not saying. Yes, he's notorious to not say anything about rookies in particular, right?
I'm just going to show you how good this kid is. And if you have a clue, you're going to see it too. And we're clued in. That is that's the most exciting.
He's the truth.
Yeah, he is absolutely the truth. Well, listen, we've got other things we could probably continue on with, but we'll save them because they'll still be around, probably very much around as the season goes on. We were going to talk a little bit about maybe a college prospect or two, maybe his dad, and but he's going to be around, and he's probably going to be at the eye of the storm.
Absolutely.
For the rest of the year, that fool who plays the fool to be the wise, to catch the wise. But I definitely enjoy getting clued in by Brandon Angelo. You can find him at Angelo_fantasy. Angelo FF, as you see, as the handle on there too. And what else you got going on that you want to share with folks?
Oh man, nothing much. I'm trying to hit these newsletters for the site subscribers. All the stuff on, like, every week we just kind of go over what I think utilization charts are looking like, and what I saw, especially with the Kyron Williams. That was a big one last week. hey, I saw him taking high leverage snaps. Like that's a really big one. And when you go back and watch the all 22 and you kind of seeing what these guys are actually doing and how they're being utilized, and is it what we thought it was going to be, or is it not? Right. And the big one this week is going to be Jahmyr Gibbs. Like he played 28% of his snaps at receiver.
Yeah.
Right. We saw that at Alabama, and that was why he was drafted 12. Right. To be utilized in that role. Right. And he had a couple interesting receptions from that position. He dropped one where he was in the slot alignment, ran an option route, beautiful option route, just mishandled it. But just stuff like that when you go back and watch the all 22 and say, hey, what was the charting on this? And you go and say, oh shit, it was 28% of his snaps were not at running back. Just stuff like that, because that's a situation too. When you look at utilization charts and the all 22, you could say this might be a player we should buy, right? Like Kyron and Puka and Tutu and just players like that, where the stats don't tell the whole story, but just looking at it from a utilization standpoint, and just doing more of that this year during seasons been super fun so far, and just doing that type of stuff. And more so the explorations of certain players, like I did on Justin Fields, is going to be something I want to continue to do. And that's been pretty well received over the first day, so it's good. But yeah, I'm just looking forward to keep doing this with you, Matt, and keep it growing and keep having fun.
Yeah, man, we're having a good time with it for sure, and I would definitely recommend folks to check out, Brandon's work over at Angelo Fantasy. It's, you're gonna get quality stuff like we saw tonight, and of course, you can find me over at Football Guys. I last week I did a very detailed charting in some creative ways of Desmond Ritter's game to kind of give you an idea about what's going on in Atlanta. And I have, I put up some film rooms at the RSP film room on, Sam Howell, Justin Fields, Nico Collins, and James Cook.
Wow.
Yeah, James Cook, and give you guys a chance to check those out. And you can see my analysis also at Football Guys if you want some of the fantasy recommendations with that. And thanks again. You can find me at Matt Waldman at X. I guess that's what we should start calling now. Pluto, X, Twitter.
Yeah, sure.
Groovy, whatever you want it to be. I'm okay with it. And you guys have a good night. We'll talk to you in a couple weeks.